Itsuki is a worthless loser who is left with an empty bank account after his parents ran away with his life savings. However, everything changes when a rich family hires him to be their daughter's caretaker, but he cracks her instead. But before this, Itsuki is adapting to poverty like Mahoraga, and he has to do tedious construction work to pay his own high school tuition, because his parents are worthless gamblers. After work one day, Itsuki returns home and gets the shock of his life when he sees that his deadbeat parents have run away with his life savings. Having nothing but 2 coins in his name, Itsuki walks through the street, wondering how he'd survive the coming days. As 2 baddies walk past him, he notices that they're from Kyo Academy, one of the top 3 schools in Japan, but he ignores them because they're way out of his league and he feels that stands no chance of attending their school. However, he finds a student identity card on the floor belonging to one of the girls named Hinako, so he calls her attention to return it to her, but once she turns, he's completely caught off guard by her beauty. Suddenly, some masked men arrive and tie her up, but Itsuki tries to play Superman, so they abduct the broke moron as well. They soon arrive at an abandoned building, where Itsuki begs the hoodlums to release him since he has no one to pay the ransom, but they tell him to shut his pie hole, so he wonders why his life has suddenly turned into a Netflix horror movie. While scanning through Hinako's details, the abductors find out that she's the heiress of the prestigious Konohana family, which makes them celebrate that they've hit the jackpot. Itsuki is amazed that Hinako looks and acts like a real-life Disney princess, but she tells him that she has to go pee and starts threatening to spill her green juice on herself, so Itsuki informs their abductors. After she's done spilling her load, Hinako announces to everyone that she filled up the toilet, so they yell at her for giving unnecessary information. This makes Itsuki realize that she's not the Barbie girl he thought she was, but she makes things worse by pestering a bandit to get her tea and sweets, so he drops a bottle of water for her and tells Itsuki to look over the brat before angrily walking away. At this point, Itsuki starts questioning his life choices, but the airhead princess ends up spilling all the water on herself while drinking it, so Itsuki takes the bottle from her and calls her to move away from the puddle beside her. However, Princess Doodoo Brain ends up falling on her face, but her goofiness cracks Itsuki up, so he checks on her injured head and tells her to avoid touching it, to avoid getting bacteria on it. When Hinako asks why the abductors took him, he explains that she dropped her identity card and hands it back to her. However, she claims that help will soon arrive and asks for permission to take a nap on his lap. Itsuki is completely bamboozled because no girl has ever asked to rest on his lap before, but his tension drops when he notices how unserious Hinako looks, so he tells her to go ahead. While resting on his lap, Hinako asks Itsuki to tell her a lullaby, but he says he doesn't know any, so she requests a funny story instead, making him annoyed by how demanding she is. Minutes later, Itsuki is shocked to see that Hinako is sleeping calmly despite their situation, but he feels grateful to her for helping him calm down, so he wipes the drool off her face, causing her to wake up. However, a bandit angrily threatens Hinako's parents that he'd use her as a punching bag if they don't comply, so Itsuki promises to be her shield. Hinako admits that she likes being around Itsuki because he's very chill, unlike the numerous caretakers she's had, which allows her to be calm as well. After exchanging introductions, Hinako tries to grab his cheek, but suddenly, a can of tear gas is launched into the window, and a rescue squad marches in to take down the abductors. However, they end up arresting Itsuki as well, but Hinako explains to her maid, Shizune, that Itsuki isn't a kidnapper, so she orders the men to release him. As they prepare to return home, Hinako tells Shizune that she wants Itsuki, so she promises to make the arrangements, but Itsuki is completely baffled. During the ride home, Shizune does a background check on Itsuki and reads out his entire pitiful situation, including how he's owing tuition and rent, and this makes him realize just how cooked he is. However, Shizune offers him a way out of the trenches by asking him to become Hinako's caretaker, but she threatens to cut his ding-a-ling off if he tries anything freaky with her. They soon arrive at the Konohana family's mansion, and Itsuki is shocked by how large it is since it makes his home look like a doghouse. Once inside, Shizune takes Itsuki to a room where he meets Hinako's father, Kagen. Seeing that Hinako is comfortable around Itsuki, Kagen concludes that his daughter has found the caretaker she's been looking for, but Itsuki has no idea what a caretaker is, so he asks Shizune to show him. Using a television screen, they show Itsuki how perfectly Hinako acts around people in school, but she also acts lazy and dumb, like Patrick Starr when no one is around. And her last caretaker was so stressed out by this that she ended up in the hospital. After the video ends, Kagan explains that it's Hinako's caretaker's job to support her from the shadows and ensure that her lazy side isn't exposed to the world so that she'd find the best husband possible and save their family's brand. Hearing this, Itsuki agrees to be her caretaker for 20,000 yen a day, but Kagan tells him to start the next day because Hinako would get lost in her own house without a caretaker. After the meeting, Shizune takes Itsuki to his room, where she informs him that he'll be attending Kyo Academy with Hinako to do his duties and hands him the fake identity they created for him. Shizune notices that Itsuki is nervous, so she assures him that she'll be there to guide him on his caretaker duties. However, she hands him dozens of heavy books to study and informs him that he'll spend hours every day learning caretaker skills, which includes self-defense. Itsuki assures her that he's stronger than Saitama due to all the physical labor he's done, so she challenges him to a duel after his studies, but feels confident that he'll beat her. However, Shizune wipes the floor with the idiot in every single round, so he apologizes for underestimating her. Afterwards, Itsuki decides to get some sleep, but he sees Hinako on his bed, so he searches his caretaker manual to find a solution. To make things faster, he tries to ask ChatGPT for answers, but Hinako appears behind him and confiscates his phone, so he begs her to return it. However, Hinako says she won't return it if he keeps talking to her in a formal tone, so he switches back to using playful words with her, making her so happy that she falls asleep with a smile on her face. During the ride to school the next day, the pea-brained princess complains that she wants to go back home, so Shizune promises to take her back if she says the same thing in 8 hours. Shizune then reminds Itsuki that it's his first day on the job and warns him not to let anyone find out that he's Hinako's caretaker or that he lives with her. However, Hinako is still bothered by Itsuki's formal speech, so she tells Shizune to make him speak normally, and Shizune agrees to let him be friendly with her when they're alone. Hinako then asks Itsuki to hug him, and this makes him freak out, so Shizune explains to Hinako that ladies aren't meant to act like desperate hoes. However, Hinako tells Shizune that Itsuki smells nice, so she asks to have a sniff of his package after school. After they leave the car, Shizune hands Itsuki a loaded bag and asks him to use it if Hinako starts acting too troubling. As they walk to school together, Hinako complains that she wants to go home, so Itsuki reminds her that she's breaking character at school, but she points out that no one is watching them yet, making him realize that she has a form of spidey sense to detect people around. Shortly after, Itsuki introduces himself to the class, and the teacher sends him to his seat. After he takes his seat, the teacher kicks off class by announcing that they'd be studying the math behind Gojo's infinity, but Itsuki is shocked because it's a topic usually handled in third year. By the end of the first period, Itsuki is already mentally drained, but he's happy to see Hinako having cheerful conversations with her friends. Just then, two nice students in class approach Itsuki and introduce themselves as Kazuya and Karen. Karen explains that most of their students are ascended commoners who transferred from other high-level schools due to family circumstances, and asks Itsuki if he's one of them, so Itsuki follows Shizuku's earlier instructions and lies that he is. Kazuya explains that he and Karen are ascended commoners as well, and they've started a support group for students in the same boat, so Itsuki cheerfully agrees to join them. However, Kazuya coldly asks him to explain his relationship with Hinako since he saw them walking to school together that morning, but Itsuki lies that their parents are acquainted, so Kazuya laughs in relief. Karen explains to Itsuki that Hinako is the biggest celebrity in their school because she has the best grades and looks as gorgeous as Scarlett Johansson. During lunch, Itsuki meets Hinako on the roof, which is her usual hiding spot, and she asks him to eat with her. When Itsuki opens his bento box, he's shocked that it's stacked with elite food, but Hinako complains that it stops her from eating the delicious stuff sold at the cafeteria. Hinako then asks Itsuki to feed her, and this makes him flustered, but he still goes through with it, so she praises his efforts. To return the favor, she feeds him as well, and Itsuki is surprised that the omelet tastes better than Angela White's natural milk. Hinako then reveals that all her past caretakers didn't last up to a month with her before quitting, but Itsuki doesn't understand why they'd throw away a job with so many perks, so she reminds him that she's the biggest issue and asks him not to quit soon. After eating, Hinako falls asleep on Itsuki's lap, and he gets a call from Shizune, who asks about his school life so far, so he informs her that he was approached by Karen and Katsuya. Hearing this, she immediately rushes to check their details and informs Itsuki that Karen belongs to a family who owns one of the largest electronics stores in the country, while Katsuya's family owns an esteemed moving company. This makes Itsuki realize that they're both traitors. During English class, Hinako nails an assignment given to her by the teacher, so her friends follow her after class to glaze her while Itsuki watches from the corner. Shizune suddenly calls him and informs him that she found out through their tracking system that Hinako has lost her wallet. He asks her where the wallet is, but Shizune says it's somewhere in the west side of the building, so he realizes that it's in the ladies' bathroom. As he wonders how to retrieve it, he's approached by a blonde baddie named Mirei, who introduces herself as the heiress to the Tenroji group, but Itsuki sighs nonchalantly, so she scolds him for not worshipping her. Itsuki humbly admits that he has no idea what the Tenroji group is, so she explains that it's a mining conglomerate that's comparable in scale to the Konohana group, but his reaction makes her realize that he's familiar with the Konohana group, so she starts crashing out about how jealous she is of Hinako. After calming herself down, she asks Itsuki what was troubling him, so he tells her that one of his friends left their wallet in the bathroom. After handing it to him, she asks how he knew about the missing wallet in the bathroom, so he explains that the owner asked him to find it and decides not to mention Hinako's name to prevent further troubles. However, Mirei suddenly turns into a TikTok motivational speaker as she reminds him that attending the school makes him a leader and claims that serving others will stop his company from thriving, so he promises to be more careful. Mirei then advises him to fix his posture as well, since it builds confidence, and once he does, she stylishly walks away while telling him to seek her if he needs more help. However, all her aura points go down the drain when Itsuki points out that her hair is dyed, but she hides her embarrassment and lies that it's legit as she runs away. After school, Karen and Katsuya invited Itsuki for a welcoming party, but he refuses because he was asked to come home early and offers to join them some other time. When he arrives at the yard, he sees Hinako throwing rocks in the river, so he asks her to go home with him, but she refuses, so he tries to pick her up. However, Hinako stubbornly rolls on the ground to stop him, so Itsuki unsheathes the secret weapon Shizune gave him, which ends up being a pack of potato chips, and uses it to bait her into following him home. Following this, Itsuki spends the next few days doing caretaker training with Shizune. After self-defense class one day, Itsuki asks Shizune why Hinako's previous caretakers left early, so she explains that they were all chosen by Kagen and unable to form a connection to Hinako due to how strict they were. On his way to his room, Itsuki meets up with Hinako, who takes him to the bath in her room and asks him to have a bath with her. While in the pool together, Itsuki asks Hinako about her friends in school, but she says she doesn't have any friends because Itsuki is all she needs, so he thanks her. However, she suddenly asks him to wash her hair, but he resists until she informs him that Shizune usually does it. While washing her hair, Itsuki asks Hinako why she chose him to be her caretaker, so she explains that she likes him for always looking after her, despite her weird behaviors. Even though Itsuki isn't satisfied with her answer, he feels happy that someone trusts him. However, Hinako starts flashing her orange-sized milk factories, so Itsuki tries to resist his gooner urges until he notices Shizune giving him a death glare from the door, which makes him scared for his life. The next day in school, Itsuki bumps into a girl on his way to class, so he apologizes and tries to walk away. However, the girl recognizes him as Itsuki and hugs him to the ground, where she tearfully expresses how much she's missed him. Several days earlier, the students were playing tennis in the school gym, and one girl, Aura, farmed by playing like Prime Nadal, so Karen explained to Itsuki that she's Naraka from Class B, a beauty queen who's great at sports. However, Karen also explained that Naraka acts just as hot-headed as Bakugo because she's the heiress of the Miyakojima Yakuza family. Hearing this, Itsuki remembered the day Kagen warned him to avoid unnecessary interactions with the Miyakojima family heiress as much as he can. However, now in the present, Naraka is crying on top of Itsuki, expressing how much she misses him because, apparently, Itsuki spent some time in the Miyakojima family estate a long time ago. During Itsuki's midget years, his worthless parents did nothing but argue over trashy isekai animes, and they eventually came to the brink of divorce. So Itsuki's mom took him to stay with the family of his late grandmother, which was, of course, the Miyakojima family. On arriving there, Itsuki found out that his grandmother was disowned by her family, but his mom found her way back in. Soon after, he found Narika using Ichigo's Bankai on a poor training dummy, so he introduced himself, but she suddenly became Master Shifu as she gave him a pep talk, advising him not to stay weak. However, Narika then blushed while asking him to take care of her, and he ended up spending most of his time there by her side. Whenever Narika experienced any inconvenience like a cockroach or her dad yelling at her, she'd cry to Itsuki, and he'd comfort her by patting her head. One day, Narika admitted that Itsuki was strong, and also acknowledged her own weakness since she couldn't even go out by herself, but Itsuki didn't blame her because she was taught all her life that the outside world was dangerous. Narika brought up how she got envious of a girl walking alone by the street one day, so Itsuki invited her to see the outside world with him, and she graciously accepted. For the next several hours, Narika enjoyed the sights of the city which Itsuki showed her, and she eventually found a candy shop where she enjoyed a new treat. From that day on, Itsuki and Narika started sneaking out of the family estate to enjoy the city together, but eventually, Narika's father found out, so he accused Itsuki of putting his daughter in danger and kicked him and his mother back out on the street. As Itsuki was leaving, Narika tearfully promised him that she'd get stronger before her maid pulled her away. Back in the present, Itsuki tells an emotional Narika to calm down, but she informs him that she busted her legs while pouncing on him earlier. After taking her to the infirmary, Itsuki tries to leave, but Narika holds him back and begs him to stay. Itsuki apologizes for taking her out without permission back then, but Narika says it's fine, because it was her outdoors experiences with him that made her less of a coward. However, Narika explains that she still can't make friends because she'd spent her whole life training like a Saiyan due to her family tradition, and this makes people think they're a bunch of warmongers. She then confesses that she gets nervous around people and ends up scaring them during interactions, which is why they started calling her a delinquent. Narika begs Itsuki to help her, but he rushes outside to answer a call from Shizune, who orders him to get back to class to continue his caretaker duties for Hanako. After saying goodbye to Narika, Itsuki walks away, but Narika passionately asks if he plans to disappear again, so he smiles while assuring her that he won't. However, Narika demands that he pats her head like old times, so Itsuki pats her head and apologizes for leaving her before, but she says it's okay since they reunited. Suddenly, Hinako arrives and asks what the two of them were doing together, so Itsuki lies that he carried her there after she collapsed, but Hinako flips the script by bringing up how Itsuki was patting her head. To clear up the matter, Narika explains to her that Itsuki was her caretaker, who took care of her years ago, and she was excited to meet him because she owes him a lot. She then asks Itsuki to come over to her place so they can resume their relationship, but Hinako declines on his behalf and informs her that Itsuki is already under her family's employ. This confuses Narika, so Itsuki explains that he's her family's caretaker, but Narika refuses to accept it because she found him first. However, Hinako ignores her rants and leaves the room with Itsuki. While walking together, Itsuki asks Hinako why she told Narika about their relationship, which was meant to remain secret, but Hinako goes into goofy mode and says she only wanted to hammer it into her thick skull, making him realize that she was jealous. Hinako asks Itsuki whose caretaker he is, and after he chooses Hinako, she smiles and invites him to get yelled at by Shizune with get, making him fear that he's about to be fired. However, during the ride home, Shizune tells Itsuki that he won't be fired because it's Hinako's fault, and also because they didn't dig deep enough into his past to find the connection between him and Narika. Shizune assures Itsuki that she'll come up with an explanation he can give Narika, and asks him to talk to her to remain silent, so Itsuki promises to do so. However, the clingy princess interrupts their conversation by asking Itsuki to pat her head, so he makes her happy by giving her what she wants. The next day, Kazuya and Karen inform Itsuki that they're throwing a welcoming tea party for him at a nearby cafe and ask him to invite anyone he wants. The first person he asks is Hinako, and she immediately agrees to go with him, but he advises her to call Shizune for permission first, which she does. Afterwards, Itsuki meets up with Narika in the yard, but she starts whining like a jealous girlfriend about his relationship with Hinako, so he lies that he was adopted into the Konohana household as a live-in apprentice. When he asks her to keep it private, she immediately agrees, because she knows it would be complicated to explain, so he invites her to his tea party. This makes her excited, because it's her first tea party, but she's also worried about ruining the mood, so Itsuki assures her that she'll be fine. While running back to class, Itsuki runs into Mirei, but she starts ranting about Hinako again, so he asks if she hates her. Mirei explains that she doesn't hate her, but rather sees her as a rival, who's equally as beautiful and brilliant as she is, but somehow gets more attention than her. So Itsuki invites her for the tea party as well. During the tea party, Karen and Kazuya ask Itsuki if he's secretly Johnny Sins, since pulled 3 royal baddies within days of joining the academy, but he explains that it was all by chance. After the introductions, Narika tries to explain her and Itsuki's relationship to Karen and Katsuya, but her social anxiety takes over and makes them scared of her, so Itsuki explains her condition to them. This makes everyone more interested in Narika and ends up having normal conversations with her. During their chit-chat, Kazuya asks Itsuki about his family's customs, so Itsuki explains the 3 seconds rule using a cookie, which stirs up an even more cheerful conversation. After the tea party, Mirei praises Itsuki for improving his posture with a smile and leaves. However, Narika informs him that her parents are being held up by traffic, so he asks Shizune and Hinako for permission to walk her home. On the way, Narika starts ranting about Itsuki and Hinako again, and she asks him to come visit her after his apprenticeship, so he nonchalantly agrees. However, Narika complains that he's just being polite, so he giggles while walking ahead. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to watch the next part.